I really am excited to be here and have a chance to chat with all of you, share a little bit of our story at ATCO Electric as it pertains to the whole supply chain and actually business outcomes, because you are part of something so much bigger, and it's really only as you fit into the whole that we get the full value as an organization. So I'm going to try and move through my formal remarks reasonably quickly so that we can leave some time for discussion. And I want to say, and I always say this when I go out and talk to my own employees, you know, it's really wide open. You can ask me about almost anything. If there's something I don't want to answer, I'll tell you that. But if you're interested in some of the material that I share, or if you just want to ask a bit about career path or whatever it is that happens to engage your fancy, I'm happy to have that dialogue with you. And Linda's going to keep me on track here so that I don't get really carried away and use up all the time that we've got. So she gave a little bit of an introduction about who we are at ATCO Electric. I'm not sure how familiar most of you are with that company specifically. We are in the northern part of the province to a large degree, and in the east central part. So we are very heavily engaged in a lot of the infrastructure development that serves our resource industry. And that has had a pretty dramatic impact on our company over the last few years. And I want to tell you a little bit about that story, and hopefully as I'm sharing it, I can share some insights into the dependency and the importance that we place on supply chain. So by the time we're done, there's really three key messages I want to leave with you. They're pretty simple. One is that supply chain has a very direct impact on our bottom line. And I think that that is true of any company that would be up here talking to you. I think it is particularly true when you are in an extremely capital-intensive industry like we are. We literally spend in the billions when it comes to investment in capital to manage our business. That requires some pretty innovative and effective approaches for managing it. The next thing I want to share with you is how growth, especially fast, unexpected growth, really increases the risk in business, and how you, as members of the supply chain industry, can have an impact on that. For good and for bad, unfortunately. And I'll share a few stories on both sides of that equation, although some of you probably have a few of your own stories that you could share, and maybe we'll have that opportunity later. And the final point, and a really important point, is just how critical these functions are to a business and our final results. And I was talking with somebody a little bit earlier about this, you know, what's the definition of supply chain? Everybody describes it a little bit differently, but fundamentally, it is the people, the processes, all of the things that are required to ensure that we have the materials and the people that we need in the right place at the right time. And that is part of a much bigger chain that makes the whole business tick. And it's really how you link to the rest of that chain that drives the success of the overall corporation. So we'll talk about that. So from a business point of view, there are some things that really drive us in terms of how we make decisions, what matters to us. And I'm going to, probably for some of you here, you're going to cringe a little bit. It's going to be a little bit of business 101, pretty simple stuff, like we're in business to make money. We have share owners who, as I said, spend last year something in the order of $1.5 billion of their hard-earned money to allow us to build transmission and distribution infrastructure in this province. That's just for our company, and we are a publicly owned company. Our share owners have a very reasonable right to expect a good return for the kind of investment that they're making, and they count on us as a business to deliver that return. And that becomes I think increasingly a challenge along with a lot of these other items when you're in a period of high growth. But it is absolutely critical, and it has to be front and center in the minds of anybody who's in business, that view of we have to be able to do this cost effectively, not just because we have to generate a return for our share owners, but because our customers are also extremely concerned about what it costs them to get the service they need. So we have a lot of oil field customers. We have a lot of people in the energy industry. They're making big investments. These are people who are driving the economy of Alberta. And they look to us and they say, what's really important to us better be important to you. And it is important to us. It's things like, how much is it going to cost them to get their power service? How fast can we get that service to them? Because they've got deadlines, they've got commercial agreements, they want to take advantage of market opportunities that are existing. And they're looking to us and saying, just because I'm needing to open up a facility in an area of the province that hasn't historically had a demand for electricity, I still need power. And that means for us, big infrastructure has to be put in place so that we can get into those regions and then so that we can connect those customers up. And it's hugely important to them. I think probably the other thing that is critically important to all of our customers is the reliability of supply. And you'll hear, I understand from the president of CNRL, I'm sure that she can share some very good examples of this type of thing. For them, if your power isn't there, if you have an outage, if you have to accept an outage because we have to do work on the system, that is millions of dollars of lost production to you. These things all drive our business interests, our business decisions, and guess what? Just about every one of the things I've talked about, directly or indirectly, is impacted by how well we manage supply chain. So it is extraordinarily important to our business. So let me talk a little bit more about our story. We have been in this province for, I think, in excess of 75 years. The northern companies that Linda mentioned that are also my accountability, Yukon Electrical celebrated its 100th anniversary. So we've been around for a long time doing what we do. We like to think that we're pretty good at it, and we certainly have some very good people. But we have been tested the last 5 years in terms of our ability to respond to absolutely unprecedented growth. You look at that chart. That chart says that in the last 5 or 6 years, since 2005, we have doubled our capital investment twice. That is significant. That is huge. Do you have any idea what impact that has on the way you run your business to be able to accommodate that kind of growth? We were a relatively small company in the total scheme of things. And faced with this, we had to make some big decisions around how are we going to operate and be successful in this environment. And a lot of it had to do with how we were going to set ourselves up for success. So one of the big things we did, you heard that I'm president of the operations division, we did an organizational split to allow one team to focus only on building. They're out there building that big transmission infrastructure. My team's accountable for everything that has anything to do with the distribution part of the system, which is the lower voltage system, which, by the way, is also growing at quite an extraordinary rate. And we are accountable for operating and maintaining that transmission system when it's done. Oh, and by the way, we own the common inventory for materials management. So we really have to work across divisions to make sure that that works. So that's a big organizational shift. What's the impacts when you reorganize like that? One of the big ones, and I think Peter mentioned it in his opening remarks, is the demand that's out there for people. So we have had to not just double the capital spend, we have had to dramatically increase the number of people in our company in the last few years. We're currently up around 2,500 people between our two divisions, and we still draw quite heavily on contractors. We also had to make some fundamental shifts in the way we do work. So we really had to step back and say, can we keep doing our policies and our processes the same way we've always done them? And we've had to tackle that head on, but we've also had to prioritize. You can only do so much. You got to deliver, and there's no point trying to boil the ocean and fix absolutely everything that could possibly be fixed. Because believe me, we got lots of things that we can work on. They're going to keep us busy for a number of years. So we're prioritizing. We're saying these are the things we really have to focus on. Supply chain is one of them, because it is such an integral part of success in a business like ours. And we've already made some improvements. We've made some organizational structuring change, and we're looking, I'll talk a little bit about what some of those things look like. So this just paints a little bit of a snapshot of what some of the major increases are, and it was hard to even pick what do you look at. You know, obviously you have a huge increase in the volumes of materials and purchasing that you need to do. You've got, and there was a couple examples we pulled out, poles and wire, because we figured, well, everybody will know that, you know, if you're a transmission or distribution system, you must buy poles and wires and steel structures. And of course we do all of those things. But statistics really don't tell the story. It doesn't really matter how big a number I put up here for you. It's not going to give you the full view of what this means. So I'm going to ask you to kind of just maybe put yourself mentally into the space of somebody being in supply chain in an organization going through this kind of change. You've now got 2 organizations. You've got multiple projects all going on at one time. Some are for new capital construction to meet a customer need. Some are because you've identified critical replacement projects that could impact reliability. They're all really important. Everybody wants their materials. They want the materials yesterday. And oh, oops, maybe I forgot that that was a long lead time item, but you know what? I promised the customer we were going to have that in. So what can you do for me? What can you do about it? And at the same time, you've got us management folks standing over you going, oh, this is getting risky. The costs are going up. We're spending a lot of money. Do we have enough controls? Oh my goodness, 5% of $1 billion is an awful lot of money. Do we really have enough, you know, audit procedures and processes? And there you are. And that's what you need, the innovation and the skill and the experience to contribute to the company, to be able to say, yep, here we are. What are we going to do about that? How are we going to manage it? And we've done a number of things. We've got certainly activity happening right within our supply chain where, you know, our director of supply chain, Jean Leutz, is here, and they're working really hard on some specific initiatives within their full control. But we've also had to do a number of things that are cross-divisional, cross-department, because the real synergies, the real innovation, the real impact comes when everybody's working on the problem together. And we've had some great successes because of that. So I always run ahead of myself on the slides, but basically the supply chain group needs to be in a position to respond and handle what is happening in the organization. And you look for people who have experience, skills, and character capable to respond and contribute in the right way at the right time. And as I said, for us, a lot of it has to do with team. I mean, when I talk sometimes about all the change that we're going through, and you know, people look at the hours that need to be spent and activity, and you know, you kind of go, well, gee, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. But you know what? It is. In its own weird way, it is a lot of fun. It's a lot more fun from where I come from anyway, to be challenged and to have those kinds of opportunities to look at how you can approach things differently than if every day it's the same old, same old. And I think one of the awesome things that all of you face, because this is not unique to ATCO Electric. I'm not talking about us being something special. You talk to most companies in Alberta and elsewhere. There is a lot of activity. There is a lot of growth. There is a lot of opportunity for enthusiastic, committed, skilled people who want to engage in the business. And for me, when people bring those things to the table, it really doesn't matter what specific functional stream they start out on, because in this kind of a role, you learn the business. And what I encourage everybody in our company, whether they're in human resources or communications or supply chain or engineering, is take advantage of the opportunities to learn the business. Because as you learn the business, you are going to have open doors to just about everything, because the skills are remarkably transferable. It's getting in there and being enthused and engaged that's going to make the difference. There is a lot at stake. There's a lot at stake for us as a company. There's a lot at stake for our customers. There's a lot at stake for our people if we don't do things well. And that's really the point I wanted to make here. I'm sure all of you, you're all, I'm sure, extremely computer literate, probably way more than me. You just have to, put in a little Google thing and you could pull up any number of companies who've had the unfortunate experience of having a severe supply chain failure when it counted the most. And I'd asked our folks to take a look and just say, you know, are there any examples that really resonate out there? And of course, there's a lot of them. I mean, there's ones from, you know, the toy industry. If you go back into the 1990s, you had a company like Toys R Us. Great product, great ideas, marketed the living daylights out of it, had enthusiastic response just before Christmas, couldn't deliver. Devastating company impact on them, reputation-wise, business-wise. It takes time to recover from something like that. You know, we've had in more recent years companies that built up all kinds of material and product, anticipating that something was going to happen, didn't really have that end-to-end view of exactly how it fit into the bigger chain of the business, and got caught with a whole lot of stuff that they couldn't use, and ended up with phenomenal write-offs that go right to your bottom line. Nobody wants to be in that position. And in a more practical day-to-day way, we've had our shares of challenges through this process. I don't want to suggest for a minute that we've gotten it all perfect. And just to give you a couple of examples, what do you think happens when our group goes out and hires a contracting firm? They go through all the bidding, they get the workers on site, it's a remote location, you put them in place, they're ready to go, and there aren't any poles. What do you think happens? You got a crew that you can't use, you've got to pay for, and you don't have your material. That has huge impacts. It's not just the immediate, obvious one of, I've got a crew sitting there idle. I'm short of crews. I need those resources. Those resources should be working on something. I've tied them up doing nothing until I can get things sorted around and get the right material in place. Maybe I've arranged for an outage. Maybe I've inconvenienced a customer and told them this is going to have to happen. And they've made plans. They've adjusted their processes because they're expecting something to happen. And now I'm going to go back and say, oops, sorry, we're going to do it tomorrow, or maybe the next day, or whenever the poles show up. It has huge consequence. And that's just a really little, simple example of how easy it is for things to go wrong. Or what if you go out and you're ordering a breaker? You know, we need breakers. We use them on our system all the time. And you don't do your homework. And you don't make sure that the suppliers you're talking to can deliver the quality that you need. And you place the order with a supplier who doesn't have the quality of product that we're ultimately going to need. And as soon as you put it up on the line, you know what it takes to get that product from wherever it comes from to our warehouse, out to the field, onto a serviceman's truck, him out there making a change, maybe a critical one when you have an outage. What happens if it fails? Do you realize how many things you have to undo when those things go wrong, and the consequential impact to so many people? And as I said, I could give you example after example. We take it for granted. It's kind of like, and I use this sometimes because of the business that I'm in, you know, you flick the lights on, you expect them to be there. I mean, it's an incredible shock if they aren't, but you don't even think about it if they are. And that's how it is with supply chain. You want it to be so smooth that nobody even thinks about you. Because if they're thinking about you, it's probably because something really went off the rails. But I think any of us who've been in business any length of time understand what it takes to get that seamless delivery. And it is a hugely important role that you play. I already mentioned this, but you know, it's something that is so important to me that I want to take just a minute and do a little bit of additional reinforcement when it comes to teamwork and collaboration. And in my experience, and I have been around a while, as the introduction said, there is nothing more powerful in organization than a team of people who know where the company needs to go, who are committed to being part of getting there, and who throw their heart and soul into it as part of a team. Companies are not a place for superstars. We're not a hockey team. We're a hockey superstar. We're a team. We're a team, and if you're going to get the puck in the net, you need to be able to do it with everybody playing together. And sometimes, particularly in companies where you're going through a lot of growth, it's really, really easy to lose sight of that, because everybody starts to build up to be sure that they're doing the right thing. So they're starting to build a little bit of a silo. It's my little group is on top of it. We've got everything we need. We're doing the right job. If those people over there could just stop screwing up for 10 minutes, maybe we could get something done. And you start to get this going on. And it's so unproductive. It doesn't accomplish anything. Even if it's true, it doesn't accomplish anything. So what I think is so important, and I believe this more for the support functions than any, because you guys are always in the middle. That's just the way it works. But to have that right attitude, to be able to say, let's sit down and work this out. What really is the problem that you're concerned about? Not to say, well, you just didn't do it right out there. If you just follow the procedure, for heaven's sakes, we'd all be happy. Taking that additional time sometimes to listen, it may be as simple as they don't know enough to follow the procedure, and a little education will help them out. But often it's more than that. You know, I was sharing an example the other day. I do a lot of chatting with my employees, because when your company's going through a lot of growth and change, it's really important for the leadership to engage, know what's going on, hear from them. I do as much or more listening, I think, than I do speaking. So I was out visiting some of the team in Fort McMurray, and one of the young linemen was talking to me. And we were just chatting about his work and what he's doing. And he just out of the blue, we weren't talking about supply chain. He gives me this great example. He says, you know what frustrates me the most? No, I don't know what frustrates. You know, the other day, my hot stick broke. Well, a hot stick is what they use to manipulate the switches on the power line. It's a really critical piece of equipment. It's on their truck. It's like their right arm. It's there all the time. He said, you know what I'm supposed to do? He said, I'm supposed to go to the catalog. I'm supposed to order it out of the catalog. I'm supposed to get somebody in Edmonton to send it to me. He said, so I went to the catalog. I couldn't find it. It wasn't in the catalog. So then I called materials manager. It's going to be 3 weeks. He said, I shouldn't tell you this, but I went across the road and bought one. I said, good for you. You needed a hot stick. But there's a lesson in there that we'll dissect and we'll look at. I don't think that what went wrong was because any particular person at anywhere in that chain of events wasn't doing their absolute best for the organization and trying to make sure they're maybe a little overwhelmed, there's maybe a lot of work, something got missed, but it's almost always a process gap. You know, something that, you know, you've got so many steps in and something breaks. And it's that ability to step back when you listen and hear, you know, what's causing people frustration, to say, well, how can I do that better? You know, that's where you have the opportunity to apply your innovation and your thinking and come up with different ideas. And each circumstance will be different. You know, each solution will be different. And you do need standards, and you do need procedures, and you do need some rigor in the field of supply chain management. You really need it. So don't misunderstand me. But it is also really important to be engaged, part of a team doing the right thing. And when we do that, the results are incredibly positive. I love this picture because to me it's a great example of when all the teams come together and things are working really well. So, you know, we've got all the equipment lined up, everybody's got the poles, we've got the guys, we're getting the work done. Very effective, very efficient, exactly what we want to see all the time. And as I said before, that's not easy. We draw on a lot of our own crews, but we also draw on crews from the outside. There's process to going out and hiring, making sure we've got the right commercial terms. Every piece of equipment that they're working with on that line was part of some supply chain process, from those huge big trucks that we have, you know, to every bit of wire or breakers or switches or anything, the poles. It's all part of this bigger process, and it all has to come together at exactly the right time so that we can get the job done as fast and as effective as possible. Because we measure those things. We measure whether we meet the in-service dates. We measure whether or not we hit our cost targets in terms of what a job is supposed to cost versus what it doesn't cost. And there's consequence when you fail. So it's really, really important that those things come together. And that they come together in the daily work, but also that they enable us as an organization to respond, and to respond quickly and effectively when you have an emergency, or I'll call it a contingency situation. As an organization, we put a lot of effort into business continuity planning and emergency response planning because the consequence of a failure on our system is so big to our customers, and then as a result to us. This example, Slave Lake area had a really bad year there for the last couple years. So they went from fire, which I'm going to talk about, to flood here a year or so ago. This was in the Swan Hills area. And they had unprecedented rain. I think it was about 2 weeks, and it just poured. And the rivers were swollen, and what it started to happen, and you can see it in this picture, you started to get the water going up to where it never goes, and it's eroded the underpinnings, you know, on one of our poles. It was also impacting our partner, or another utility company, I wouldn't call them a partner, but another utility company in the same area. They were having struggles. They were having system down. So we build the system, the transmission system, so that you can have a failure like this and not lose power to your customers. But you can only have a couple of failures before you're going to start to actually be impacting people. So we had line down. AltaLink had line down. Then that small picture that you've got, that's one of our big transmission transformers in a substation. Hugely expensive piece of equipment. Failed. Now we are one contingency away from shutting out the whole town of Swan Hills, the entire oil field area, and a number of large customers. One contingency away. And we do have some customers out because AltaLink's line was already out. We had to respond to that. Think about the pre-planning that you need to have in order to be ready and able on all levels to go in there and change out something like that transformer. That is not common inventory. We don't have those things sitting around waiting to be used. That would be hugely cost inefficient. So we do have very strategic sparing in terms of where we have equipment like that that can be moved. Moving it is no small feat, and installing it isn't any small feat. And I remember this particular incident extremely well because, unfortunately for me, most of my senior management team had taken that week in July for vacation. So I was there with the rest of the guys who actually knew what they were doing, the hands-on team, to respond to this crisis when we pulled our crisis management team together. Blown away by how good this team was and how prepared they were for the situation that we had. They didn't have all the answers worked out, but we had the material management, the supply people knowing where we could go to get the equipment that was missing. We had people who had the vendor connections to know who they could go to and how quickly we could get something turned around. We had the engineering group looking at what options we could have, because there's different ways you can work around scenarios like this. And you just had this powerful coalition of people working together to make sure that we didn't cause a bigger impact on that community and upon our oil field customers because we had this difficult circumstance. That's the kind of impact that you guys have. It's probably not what you see. I mean, one of the challenges often of being in a role like supply chain, and it depends a lot on the company, I don't know that you always get to see the impact of what you do. You hear about it if it doesn't work, but do you really get to see the power of what it's like when it all comes together? And what I want to do now is I want to share a video that we have, and it's not a supply chain video, but it is a video about the power of bringing together all of the skills and competencies in an organization in a time of crisis, and the impact that that has on everyone, including the people who are part of it. So I want to share this with you, and then I'm open for discussion and questions.
It was mass chaos. There was a wall of smoke, and I was like, you know, something I've never been a part of, and I couldn't really believe what I was seeing. There was cars coming out of all directions. There was nowhere really to drive our big fire truck, so we just kind of blared the horn and siren and did the best that we could.
It was a monster, and it was a war. Yeah. Be one you'll never forget, that's for sure.
I remember up on top of the ladder truck and you're saying, holy Jesus, this is not happening. This one's catching fire, this one's catching fire, this house is catching fire, and like, where do I go?
People who've lost their homes here, businesses, people are being thought about all across the country.
Wires down, everything is gone, transformer poles, everything. It's certain areas, there's just nothing left.
It was beyond overwhelming. We had approximately 10,000 customers without power and gas. You know, we were thinking 2.5, 3 months before we'd have people in the community.
We're actually putting up signs in the area to make people aware that there are wires down in the area. So we have
our emergency plans went into action right off the bat.
The wire is hanging, the poles are burnt, so...
Approximately 600 employees between ATCO Gas and Electric come to our aid. It was like the cavalry comes running in. It was breathtaking.
Bringing that ATCO camp in not only provides shelter and food and services for our employees, but it provides a sense of coming together and a sense of home.
It's going to be long days, just like they have been for you guys, so just pace yourself.
Do the check, stop, they just want to go to their home.
This is kind of the optimal test. It's the game week of what we do.
It's been so busy, you know, you don't even know that you're working the 10, 12 hours.
The employees here, especially, it's fantastic what they've done, because they don't give up. You know, they go to battle for you right to the death, just about. You know, if we're an army, I'd take these guys any day.
I can proceed with my hot stick. Today I feel a lot better now that we're restoring the power and the community's coming back together, and very soon you'll be letting the people in.
Our utility groups like ATCO have always been part of our family. They're very community involved, excellent community stewards. It's just amazing though, the dedication, working 24 hours, doing everything you can with little sleep, because everyone's thinking about our community.
You hear the humming up there?
It just feels wonderful. Spark life.
We're way ahead of schedule. I think it's several weeks, so it's nice to bring everyone home finally.
It's great. I don't know what I'm going to face, but I'm glad to be coming home.
I got some information on stores that are currently open in Slave Lake, so yeah.
It just gives you the tiniest taste of what it was like to be there. You know, my VP of distribution and I went up within a day of it happening. We were on the phone with the guys as the fire was happening. We'd put our crisis management team together. Everybody was there. We were already working on things. We were tracking down our employees. You know, we had over 100 people living in that community, and we wanted to know where every single one of them was. And we found them, and we talked to them, and we reassured them, and we did. There was so much logistics to this thing. You can't even begin to understand what it was like to be part of it. And when we went up there, the guys, some of the ones who we were talking about, most of them are volunteer firefighters too, so they were doing double duty that night, sleeping in a truck. We had ATCO Gas, our sister companies up there too. They had a gas barbecue. So they had the gas barbecue in the warehouse. So had a lot of burgers and sleeping in the truck. There was no place to go. There was a very few camps in the community. They were all full because they had the RCMP, all the emergency workers. No place for a shower. No place for a hot meal. The biggest impact, and this, you know, it's the power of team and community. You know, we pulled on every relationship we had, and everybody came through. And ATCO Structures, another sister company of ours, what they were able to accomplish in days, it was like the cavalry coming in. When we were standing there on about day 2, 3 of the whole thing, and they brought the camps in on big trucks. That night, we invited the whole community that was there working for supper. We could feed them a full meal. We could start putting people up, giving them a shower in the morning. Powerful stuff. And the impact, you know, that all of this has on people is just profound. And I wanted to use it because, like I said, I don't think often you get to see the impact of the logistics management that's part and parcel of what you guys do every day and the way it can translate into those kinds of results. So that's as much as I was going to share with you today.